The morning of my 68th birthday started like any other day, quiet, slow, familiar. The sun spilled through the lace curtains in my kitchen, catching the steam rising from the cup of chamomile tea I had brewed for myself. I sat at the small round table by the window, still in my bathrobe, staring at the single card that had arrived that week. A generic happy birthday from my dentist's office. There was no phone call from my son, Adam. No knock on the door. No surprise brunch like the ones I used to make for him growing up. Banana pancakes, orange juice, extra whipped cream. Nothing. Just the clock ticking, the house settling, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Please subscribe to our channel and tell me in comments from where are you watching this video. I glanced at the photo on the wall. Adam at age 7, missing his 2 front teeth, his arms wrapped around me after his first piano recital. He used to cry if I left for work without kissing him goodbye. That boy, full of giggles and sticky fingers and spontaneous, I love you, Mom moments. Where had he gone? What had I done to raise a man who now only saw me as an obligation? I had texted him 2 days before. I know you're busy, but maybe we could do something small for my birthday this weekend. He left it on read. Still, I made excuses. He was under pressure. He was helping run the startup I had helped finance 5 years ago. He was living in the beautiful high-rise condo I had fully paid for in his name temporarily when he'd gone through his divorce. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he forgot. But deep down, I knew forgetting wasn't the problem. That afternoon, I put on my nicest blouse and took a cab across town to the condo I hadn't seen in over a year, the one he always said was too messy for me to visit. I brought a small cake, red velvet, his favorite. I thought maybe if I just showed up we could talk. Maybe I could remind him that I wasn't asking for much, just to be seen. The doorman looked surprised when I gave Adam's name. He didn't mention guests today, he said. I'm not a guest, I replied softly. I'm his mother. He let me up. When I knocked on the door, I could hear music inside. A woman laughed. Then silence. The door swung open, and there was Adam, barefoot, shirt half unbuttoned, looking like I had interrupted something important. He blinked, irritated. Mom? I just thought I'd stop by, I said, holding up the cake like it was a peace offering. It's my birthday. He stared at me. Right. There was a pause, a beat too long. Is this really necessary? He added. You can't just show up like this. I'm in the middle of something. I felt my chest tighten. I haven't seen you in months. I didn't want anything fancy, just a moment. He looked past me, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I'll call you later, all right? I'm busy right now. I took a breath. Adam, I paid for this place. I raised you. I just wanted to see you on my birthday, that's all. And then he said it, loud, sharp, final. Jesus, Mom, you're just waiting to die and guilt me into playing along. The words hit like a slap. For a second, the hallway tilted. I stared at him, hoping he'd take it back, that maybe I had misheard. But he didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just stared back, annoyed. I nodded, slowly, said nothing. Then I turned and walked back to the elevator with the cake still in my hands. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't text him. Not again. Instead, I went home, placed the untouched cake in the fridge, poured myself a glass of wine, and walked into the study where I kept all my documents, neatly labeled, neatly filed, deeds, bank records, the folder titled Condo Downtown Unit 1203, his unit, my property, still under my name. I had only let him stay there after all. It was meant to be temporary, just until he got back on his feet. Well, he was standing tall now, so I sat down and made a call to my lawyer. And I didn't tell Adam a thing. Not yet. The birthday card from my dentist stared at me from across the room. I raised my glass toward it and whispered, Happy birthday, Evelyn. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. I didn't rush into it. That's not who I am. I raised a child, managed a household on a shoestring budget, buried a husband, survived 2 recessions, and learned that real decisions, the ones that matter, don't come from anger. They come from clarity. And when Adam stood there in that doorway, more bothered by my presence than shaken by his own words, I knew clarity had finally arrived. He saw me as a burden. I had become a ghost in his life, a silent sponsor who existed only to be tolerated and never celebrated. And so, I stopped sponsoring. Over the next week, I worked quietly with my lawyer, Carol, a no-nonsense woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper mind. She remembered the original title paperwork from years ago. "Still in your name. He has no legal claim," she confirmed, tapping the file. "We can initiate the sale any time, but are you sure?" I was. I was sure in a way I hadn't felt about anything in years. It's funny how motherhood can blur things. You forgive things you shouldn't, stretch your patience past breaking, and call it love. You explain away their cruelty as stress, their distance as independence, their dismissiveness as maturity. But it isn't. It's neglect. And if it came from anyone else, you wouldn't allow it for a moment. Within 2 weeks, a buyer was lined up. A sweet retired couple from Nova Scotia who fell in love with the view and the fact that it came furnished. They offered slightly under asking, but I accepted with no hesitation. I didn't want a bidding war. I didn't want to squeeze one more dime out of a space that had held so much invisible pain. I just wanted it gone. Adam still hadn't called, not to apologize, not to say thank you, not even to pretend. But I didn't reach out. I didn't need to anymore. Instead, I sent a formal letter, one that Carol helped draft, giving him 14 days to vacate the unit. I included the necessary documentation, the contact for the buyer's agent, and a brief, impersonal closing line. "You will need to arrange alternative housing before the closing date." A week later, he called. I watched the phone ring. Twice. 3 times. I answered on the 4th. "Mom!" "What the hell is this letter? Are you selling the condo?" "I am," I said calmly, stirring sugar into my tea. "Why? You said it was mine to live in." "No, Adam. I said you could stay there until you were stable. That was 5 years ago. You're stable now. Very stable, it seems." His voice hardened. "You're doing this because of what I said, aren't you?" I let the silence hang. Then I answered, "I'm doing this because of what you meant." There was a pause. Then, as always, he tried to regain the upper hand. "You can't just throw your own son out." "I'm not throwing you out," I said, now walking to the window. "I'm letting go of a weight that was never mine to carry." "You're being dramatic." I smiled. "You used to call me that when you were 10 too, back when I packed your lunch every day and made costumes for school plays." "You're ruining our relationship." "Adam," I said, my voice unwavering, "we haven't had a relationship in years. I just finally accepted it." He hung up. 2 days later, I received a text from him. A simple, "Wow." That was it. No anger, no apology. Just the sound of a door slowly closing. I didn't feel victorious. I felt light. I spent the following weekend at a small cabin I'd booked near the lake. Emily, my niece, who always remembered my birthday, came up to join me. We cooked over an open flame, took walks along the water, and laughed at nothing and everything. I hadn't laughed like that in years. The money from the condo was wired into my account by the end of the month. Carol asked if I wanted to reinvest it. I told her no. I wanted to live with it. Maybe travel. Maybe start a small garden. Maybe help someone who actually remembered that love wasn't something you collected. It was something you honored. And I still hadn't touched the birthday cake. It was time to. 3 months later, I was sitting on a sunlit bench in a park not far from my new apartment. A smaller, quieter place that I'd chosen myself, without consulting anyone. I watched 2 kids feed breadcrumbs to ducks while their mother smiled from a nearby picnic table. It reminded me of the simpler years when Adam used to cling to my hand and ask if ducks could talk. Back then, I would have done anything to protect his world from sadness. Now, I was finally protecting mine. I hadn't heard from Adam since the day the moving truck pulled away from the condo. No thank you, no apology. Just silence. And surprisingly, that silence didn't hurt. It felt like closure. I'd spent years clinging to the idea that if I just gave enough, waited long enough, or loved hard enough, he'd come around. But the truth was simpler and colder. He saw me as something to endure, not cherish. I donated most of the furniture from the condo, including the grand piano I bought when he was 15. A single mother on a secretary's salary, I had skipped dinners so he could play, but I didn't need those memories in my space anymore. I was building new ones. That fall, I used part of the condo money to fund a scholarship at the local community college for women over 50 going back to school. I named it anonymously after my mother, a woman who raised 5 children on grit and beans. That act, quiet and unnoticed, brought me more peace than anything I had done in years. And on my next birthday, I didn't wait for a phone call. Instead, I lit a single candle on a homemade cupcake and whispered, "You're not waiting to die. You're finally living." Then I made a wish, and this time it was for me.